All right, welcome to the REI Diamond Show, Victor. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Cool. I figured we'd start with a location, drop a pin in your market, and kind of talk about where you're doing business first, and then maybe as part of that, you could talk about how you got in real estate and what your business looks like today.
Sure. So I live in Gainesville, Florida. I flip in the surrounding area. So mostly Alachua County, but a little bit like if it's a good deal, we'll go a little bit farther. But I like to keep it probably within an hour driving distance is how I typically look at it. And yeah, so I primarily do fix and flip. So buy it, fix it up, sell it is how I typically do it. And I got started full time about 2.5 years ago. Was working full time. That wasn't working out. And just wanted to make a shift. And I in real estate and happy. And I don't want to look back. I want to do. I'm happy. This is it. This is the goal. This is the dream.
Nice, nice, living the dream. So tell me about the first deal. Like, what went through your mind? What were some of the fears? Did you lose some sleep as you were waiting for the settlement, or maybe the contractors to show up? Like, walk me through some
Yeah.
of the days and sleepless nights, if any, of that first deal that you ever done.
Yeah, so let's talk about like the first fix and flip I did. It was something like so I had back then I had like a low credit score, like low 500 and maybe a couple thousand in the bank. I still found this great deal. I found this great deal and basically put it under contract. I did then what I call like I found a money partner. So like they put in all the money to buy it, to renovate it, to sell it. And I just basically like found the deal, helped manage it, and like we split the profit. We did, the renovation took about 8 weeks, so it wasn't too bad. It was just outdated, like demo, debris removal, paint, flooring, new kitchen. Then we called it good. We listed it. So it was pretty straightforward, nothing crazy like rip out the walls or like a full gut, nothing like that. So we did that. I think the nervousness came around because we listed it, and I think it sat on the market maybe like 2 weeks, which in retrospect, like 2 weeks is nothing, and then we got an offer and we ended up taking the offer and we made 28K net profit, which is great. And we split that. But yeah, during those 2 weeks, like every day we're like, okay, were there any showings? What did they say? We're just like kind of freaking out those first 2 weeks. And I mean, this was like 2018. So the market was still hot, and still like going. So we were just freaking out for no reason. So I don't know if it's sleepless nights for specifically, but it was like, when are we gonna not get an offer? What's going on type of thing, which is kind of silly.
Yeah, I know. Looking back, right? Like, how many have you done since 2018, Victor?
I've done so I did about 20 last year and 30 this year is the goal. So I've been like 30-ish total, like completed, 100% completed. I have like maybe 13 or so going so far, like right now.
Nice, 13 go now. Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think back to when I first got in the business, 2006. The market was hot. I was 26 years old. And the thoughts
Hey.
that went through my mind, I did something similar where we had one under contract and I brought in a money partner who had a little more experience than I did. I'm still actually partnered with him to this day on our main business.
Awesome.
We back and forth. It wasn't like it was like from there on, but I remember thinking like with every deal we ever flipped, certainly for the first like 5 or 10 years, because I was like renting apartments and like not owning my own home, and I'm like, who is gonna pay these prices for these houses when they're all said and done? This is like mind-boggling that someone's going to organize the financing to get to the closing table for $165,000 for this house. This is like unbelievable. And I didn't fully get comfortable with the volume of transactions in the market. It probably didn't help that, when I came in 2008 and 9, the transaction volume shifted and the
Mm.
market, this feeling of disbelief I had in 2006, 7, and 8 as we were doing deals, the disbelief in that anyone would pay these prices, eventually that came to fruition and was like that from 2009, 10, 11, 12. In 2013, it started to feel like a stable real estate market,
Mhm.
and then it's been growing since then. And I feel like we're at a crescendo, and it does feel right now, as we record here in July 2021, it does feel like 2007 in a sense, where like the frothiness, the bidding wars, the rapid escalation in prices when we're pulling our comps to like evaluate our deals. It does feel a lot like that. However, I'm not losing sleep like I probably was then with the disbelief of people paying these prices. Mostly for the reason that we have a lot of the Wall Street money that's coming in. So we have this kind of wild card of institutionalization of single family real estate, along with things like bigger
Mhm.
pockets and this kind of like the internet, the real estate 2.0 as a trend makes me feel a little more comfortable that even if a ton of inventory comes on, we're not going to see this vacuum in the marketplace. Like we had Zillow, but we didn't have iBuyers in the market. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
it wasn't until I think Blackstone and a couple of the other Wall Street firms entered the market. I forget 2011, 2010, somewhere in there. So we have this like new pool of capital that enters the market that in a sense it will probably prop up prices even if the single family homeowner is not the only game in town like they were in 2006. So it's my
Yeah,
long-winded
hope
way of
so.
saying that I'm okay with the market and I'm not losing sleep, and I think things would probably remain stable for the next year or two. I know that was a little bit of a diversion, but I guess my question for you is what are your thoughts on the market? Any observations or forecasting on where you think we're going with this thing?
I mostly agree. Typically cycles follow like it's like a short-term debt cycle. So I guess things are going good. Like people look back and like, oh well, things have been nice, good for the last couple of years. So let's just like pile on more debt until it becomes too much. And like if you look at the short-term debt cycle, like kind of where we're at now, like versus '07, '08, where we were at there, like I think it was a lot worse, like mortgage uh, restrictions, I guess you could put it that way, like mortgage. I'm trying to think of the word. Like the underwriting process was a lot more loose. You had like no doc loans. You had like these subprime mortgages. You had like stated income. Like if you write down a number, that's how much you made, and that's how much they lent you. So it was a lot looser back then. I don't see it as being as loose there. Like there are definitely like the short term, like there's people taking on a lot of debt. I think they say on average, like it's 7 times their yearly income. So if they make 50,000 a year, they can buy a $350,000 house, which is a lot. That's a lot of debt for someone at that size. But like the interest rates are low, and as long as that stays low, we should be fine. So we'll see about that. I think it's going to stay low for a while. So I
Yeah,
think it's it might correct. I don't think it's going to be as big as '08, '09.
yeah.
It'll be a smaller correction. And just to your point, I think there's gonna be enough appetite, investor appetite. We'll just like snap it up, and I don't think it'll be that big of a deal. But it could shift like 5-10%. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd be inclined to agree. Like the '07, '08, the 2001 to 2005 era came with these resetting mortgages,
Mhm.
meaning like teaser rates were
Yeah.
probably a really, really big time bomb that was waiting there to happen. And you fast forward to now, the loans that were written in the last 3 years, probably 8, 9, 10 years, et cetera, since the lender licensing requirements came in with, I think, Dodd-Frank. Um, these low interest rates and these high debt amounts are not attached to adjustable rate mortgages. So even though they owe
Yeah.
$348,000 on a $353,000 house that they bought or whatever the case is, like it's fixed at 2.85 or 3.15. So the payment is not going to
Yeah.
go outrageous come 6 months, 8 months, like we did have happen in '07, '08. So cool. I digress. So we talked about your rehabbing business now. 8 weeks on the first rehab. Was your money partner a well experienced and well connected contractor oriented person, or did you kind of step into the business and run that entire rehab from the start, or maybe you had some rehabbing experience and contacts before you got into the business? It sounds really quick for the first fix and flip deal to do it in 8 weeks.
So yes, yes, and yes. So
Okay.
pretty much we got hands in, hands on. So what happened? So the deal, like it was again, it wasn't that much, like paint, flooring, new kitchen, like demo, removal, like a lot of little things. So no, not a huge renovation. What happened? So it was hit by Hurricane Irma. It was a vacant house hit by Hurricane Irma, absentee owner. So it was inherited property. Like she lived in Texas, properties in Florida, obviously here in Gainesville. Didn't want to deal with it. So basically, a log came in through the roof, and like there's a hole in the roof, and there's a hole in the wall. So like we had to clean up all that debris.
Hmm.
So I remember like we cleaned it up, threw it in a dump trailer. We actually didn't get a dump trailer. Here's the funny thing: we didn't get a dump trailer. There's one down the street with a neighbor, so we threw it all those stuff in there. So just to save the money, just to save the $500 or whatever. I think we filled that thing up, but I think we talked to them about it, and eventually they were fine with it. So I don't think it was that big of a deal. But to answer your question, so it's pretty hands-on. pretty hands-on with how we did it. So I remember like I got, dirty, I got sweaty several times just trying to get the project done. Um, so that's how I kind of look at it there. But I was somewhat experienced. Like I have some background with like the family has done some like rentals and those types of renovations, a couple, like a handful, not, hundreds or dozens, anything like that. But I had a little bit of background. Yeah, we're just, elbow grease and made it happen.
Yeah, it's kind of how I did my first flip. The same partner who was the money partner on the one we bought and sold together, he funded from the IRA my very first rehab project. And I remember I ordered the windows ahead of the closing, put my deposit down. I like moved forward with full faith. But I, like you, like I wasn't a full time contractor in the business, but I grew up on the tools. I knew how to like wire, I was like an electrician's helper at 12 and 13 years old.
Oh,
My dad
awesome.
was a contractor. So I had like just enough experience to be comfortable with wires and pipes and everything else to figure out how to do the rest of it when you got in there.
Yeah.
I think back to how hands on I was then, and now it's there's houses we flipped. I've never seen most of them actually that we've done this year. Maybe I don't think I've even seen one that we flipped in all of 2021. I mean, I lean heavily on our well developed team, but I guess I put myself in the my own shoes and your shoes, and I think, well, we did come in with these assets, this mindset, or this like, even if it was limited experience, it was some experience of like doing the renovation. How
Yeah.
important is that some evaluation of your skill set for a new flipper, right? Somebody's getting in the business, they want to flip houses, but perhaps they should take an inventory and say, like, wow, I haven't never even cleaned out my own gutters. Like, should I be renovating a house? Like, how important is it to have some kind of hands on rehab experience or just an attitude of like, go get it if I'm setting out to go fix and flip houses?
I wouldn't say it's that important. Like for me personally, I'm glad I did it just because it's harder to pass things by me nowadays in terms of management. Because I've done like a debris removal, I've done the demo. So if that takes like 2 weeks, I'm like, hey, wait a second, there's kind of something fishy here. It shouldn't take that long. So it's harder to like it's easier for me to manage just because I've done it. So I know how long things take. I know how much it should cost. I know how much work it is. So that sort of thing. I wouldn't say it's 100% necessary to go through that. There's still a lot of value. I would just take an inventory of like what you want to be doing. If you're like working full time in terms of like W-2 and you say like, hey, I don't want to touch the project, you can hire a general contractor. Like contractor can take care of everything A to Z for you. So that's how I look at it, where you can kind of play around with it. How I see it, there's like three real models with regards to like doing the renovation. So first is do it yourself. It's like you're doing, you're picking up the paintbrush, you're doing the flooring, like you do it yourself. Second is like done with you. So you hire a subcontractor, you hire a painter, does the painting. Okay, you pay him. You hire a flooring guy, he does the flooring. Okay, you pay him. But you're kind of like the project manager slash general contractor. Third is the most hands off. That's more like general contractor. Like you pay someone a check and like, hey, give me the keys in 30 days or give me the keys in 60 days, and it's going to be done. There's nothing. Wouldn't say there's anything wrong with either model. It's just a trade off. So if you do it yourself, it's going to cost you time. It's going to save you money. If you do the general contractor, it's going to cost you money, save you time. So that's how I look at it. So like where you are in your life and like how you want to balance those things is how I would recommend going about and making that choice. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. If you want to do it yourself, go do it yourself. If you want to hire a general contractor, that's fine. But at least you should know going into it, like, hey, these are the different ways I can think about this to make it happen. I don't have to do it all myself. I can, look at these other avenues.
Yeah, I remember the first couple I did in 2006, 2007. Like I started, I was like living in my mom's in one of the bedrooms I grew up in as a kid, and I'm like 26, kind of like hit the rocks in life as it were. And I remember like when I funded the deal, that was the most amount of money that I had ever seen in my bank account ever in my life. And I'm like, well, if I just did like 25 bucks an hour, I'm making like more per hour than I ever made in my life to like go in here and pull the wire and here go in and, paint the radiators and all that kind of stuff. And it took me a little while to like learn that lesson of starting to be able to delegate that stuff out and like recognize my own value at a higher and higher level, which now these days, like, be the source of the deals, finding the next deal, organizing things. It pays more than being a GC for me, right? Maybe if the construction, because you're paying GC, he's going to have to make his 10, 20%. That's 10, 20% that you're saving, keeping in your pocket in the done with you method, where you're running the job and hiring the contractors, and you're the one doing the final clean out, and you're kind of, visiting the property once, twice, 3 times a week, etc. And obviously, if you do all the work yourself, I've heard people say that, oh yeah, man, they went in, they did all the work themselves, it cost them like 10 grand in material, and each of them made 20 grand. I'm saying, so okay, they made 40 grand, but really you probably would have had to pay about 25 of that in labor. So like if we took the labor costs that they had applied on their own project, what did they net? 15,
Mhm.
20 grand? Like a lot of people are going to take a pass on that deal. It's a lot of risk for 15, 20 grand. Um, so I guess my line of questioning, Victor, is that I already know that you help new people get into the business. Do you kind of want to set that stage here for listeners so they kind of know what you're doing as we continue on with this line of questioning?
Yeah, for sure. So I fix and flip actively. That's what I do. I also teach people. I mostly focus on beginners, like how do you get your first deal and how do you hit 6 figures. So that's how I typically do it. I teach you everybody everything A to Z. Like how do you get the deal? How do you get the money? How do you run contractors? How do you estimate repairs? Like anything you could ever think of. I just cover like step by step on how to do it. So I mentor people nationwide. What's really cool about real estate, like you and me, like we're not competitive. We can be cooperative. Like you're not doing deals here. From what I know, I'm not doing deals over there. So we can just help each other out. Someone selling a house in New York doesn't affect me here in Florida, directly. So we can just help each other out. So it's really cool to be able to give back and mentor people and see them go through the same journey that I went through and see them, get their first deal and then beyond.
So, what is the biggest obstacle to flipping that first house? Not necessarily for you, but for any
Mm.
one of the people that you've worked with in the last 12 months, let's say.
Yeah, for sure. So people always come to me with two things like, okay, how do I get the money? And then how do I get the deal? And I try to reframe it to them where it's like, it's never really about the money. Because if it's a good enough deal, people will throw money at you. Like if you, let's say there's a house that you can sell for 100,000 for easy numbers, and you have it and it's tip top, perfect shape, it's for 50,000. So you can list that property and the next day get it sold and make, like 40K net profit. Like people are going to throw money at you to make that deal happen because it's a great deal. So what it really is, it's not about the money, it's about the deal. So if you can get a good enough deal, like that's really the focus. So if then the focus is like, okay, how do we get deals? Then we talk about that. But people always think like, okay, well, what about the money? What about the money? And that kind of hangs them up. So if there's, just one focus, a singular focus versus two, like you're going to be more successful.
Yeah, I agree. When I got in 2006, I was 26. When I first kind of had like a serious thought that I wanted to flip houses, I was probably 18, 19. I'm thinking, man, I remember I was 18 reading like rental books and you had to have the down payment. Then you did the refi for the cash out. And I'm going, oh, we're going to get this 40, 50 grand to kind of start with or however much. I guess someday I'm going to do this. And so I like the people you're describing always thought the money was the barrier. And then the mentors I had in 2006 said the same thing that you said. It's all about the deals. And the overarching highest value thing that I've come up with for my own career, my trajectory was like, I remember like writing in journals and coming up with this, revelation that I was going to become the source of deals. Like I was
Yes.
going to find more deals out there than I could possibly do, possibly fund, like whatever the case was. And a lot of that has to do with, okay, I got to like market, I got to generate leads, I got to get out there and make offers, I got to be networking with people and following up on my offers. I have to be a highly skilled underwriter of whatever location these deals are located. Right? It's like some people will focus on one specific neighborhood. I'm buying in this zip code, or I'm buying 20 minutes, 30 minutes from my house, or I like this area for this reason. These guys build up a rental portfolio, 30, 40, 60 houses in a 30-minute drive, and they really underwrite that area. But I have conversations with that same avatar of an investor that I'm kind of referring to. And like, if I'm looking for him or her to pull comps and figure out values in, 30 minutes in the other direction, they're a fish out of water. They're not going to spot the value there. So me being the deal maker, I've had to teach myself how to underwrite deals in, high crime areas, south side of Chicago, North Philly,
Mhm.
South Philly, Center City, Philly, Atlanta, Georgia, Beltline deals, all over Tampa. Like I've got to be able to figure out what are these different dynamics and metrics to make the world tick. And for someone who's just starting, like, you don't have to figure out how to go underwrite 3 different cities. But writing that on, I tell this to the people on my team, like, you got to be a deal maker. You got to be a source of deals. Like, write that on your bathroom mirror. That's an important goal, right? I get it. You want to make 100 grand a year and write that on there. But I'm telling you, if you wake up and remember that you are the source of deals and you're a deal maker every morning, that's going to pay as much, probably more than writing the income goal down and putting that on. I mean, you can put them both on the bathroom mirror, something you're going to see every day. So that like philosophy of being the deal maker
Yeah.
has served me well. Um, so let's talk about it. I mean, how do you find the deals? What would you tell that same student who was working with you how to go get a deal?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people get the wrong impression. Like they go and they watch like HGTV or they watch those TV shows on TV, obviously, and they're like, oh, okay, well, let me just get a realtor. Like, let me hop on Zillow. Let me start making offers. I don't know about you, but so for the 20 flips I did last year, only one came from MLS. Like only one was listed publicly. And there's a lot of problems with MLS, but one of it is obviously it's public, so everyone sees it. So everyone gets the same access to the data. Everyone can see it. Everyone can look at it. It's super competitive. If you've ever gone to an MLS listing here for a deal recently, like there's 10 investors there, like everyone's looking at it. It gets bid up to a point where like the numbers don't even make sense. Like you're like, hey, I want to buy it for X. I'll put in Y. I'll sell for Z. That's zero profit. Like, wait, how does this even work? So you're really competing with tough, like a lot of different people who are like buying cash, who are going to do the work themselves, and like they have different economics than you, unless you have those same economics. But still, like it's it's pretty risky. Just like using your other example to do all that work, and then you make 15,000 net. Like for some people that's okay, but for most people that's not really scalable. That's the other thing, because you only do a couple per year. That's kind of tough. So I always recommend like, okay, there's on market, which is public, and there's off market. You really want to focus on off market. That's going directly to the seller. Go to, talk to the seller directly, like no realtor, no middleman. Like you're talking them kind of belly to belly. And that's where I've seen the most success. So that's the first thing, like as an overarching principle. Like let's start with that. Then we can get into the details. Like, okay, how do I talk to people specifically? How do I talk to sellers directly? But I just want to like have that overarching principle, like, hey, you got to talk to people directly. You got to do off market, and then let's go from there.
Yeah, it makes sense. So what about the contractors? I mean, we touched on somebody with a very limited amount of experience in our conversation. How does that person, now let's assume they found a deal, they've
Yeah,
lined up the money, and now what about the contractors? I mean, labor is tough to come by these days, Victor.
it is. It is. So a couple of things with that. Again, I want to tie it back to the deal, and then I'll answer that question directly. Like if you get a great deal, let's say you're going to buy it for 50, you have to put in 10, you're going to sell for 100. Like even if you mess up with the contractors and it takes longer than expected, and like you go over budget, it's not 10,000 renovations, 15,000 renovation, like it's still a good profitable deal. So as long as you have that good profit buffer in there, like it's okay to make mistakes. So I just want to set that. If you're setting out like, hey, I'm going to make only 10 grand on this deal, then like if something goes wrong, or if you go over budget, or if it takes longer, like that 10,000 can very easily become like a zero or a negative number. So that's really key when coming to contractors. So just let's start with that foundation, then go from there. I also think of contractors like in marketing and sales, like they have the funnel concept. So let's say for the like getting a deal, like you like contact 50 people, make an offer to 15, and then like I don't know, 3 of those become a deal, something like that. So you start out with a high number, with a big number, and it kind of gets smaller, just like a funnel. You kind of filter through through the information. Especially now I see the same with contractors. So get a hold of 20 plumbers, only 10 will get back to you. 10 won't even bother to call you back. 10 will get back to you. Let's say 3 can actually give you a quote because they actually have time, and then 1 will be your guy who can actually get started within a reasonable time frame, reasonable price to make it happen. So it's that same sort of sales funnel mentality, especially nowadays. The contract, this pre-corona, it wasn't that big of a deal, at least for us in this market. You can get people. I used to have a painter, and like he could get stuff started for us like next week, because he had like some work but not that much, and now he's booked out for like 2-3 months. It's tough to get the same guy. It's the same guy, same skill set, just like a tough hot market where everyone's so busy. So I'm happy to talk more about the contractors, but that's how I think of it, especially now. Like you got to, think of it like a funnel and really, really put the effort out there. I talk to a lot of people and they're like, oh, I talked to 2 contractors and none of them can do it. So everyone's booked out. So I'm just going to give up. It's like, no, you gotta make it happen, dude. We got to make this happen.
You can't give up after you own the house.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like, oh, I'll just get started in 3 months. Like, ew, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of holding
So
costs.
what are your favorite sources of going to find these 20 plumbers, right? How you
Mhm.
find them in the location, the zip code? I mean, we're going online, we're going to Angie's List. Like, what's the,
Yeah.
secret source of contractor phone numbers?
So that's the thing. There isn't a secret source. That's what I've seen. Like, there's no magical place where all the awesome contractors hang out. It's kind of a mix. I've had success online, just like a Google search, finding someone that way. I've had success like local RIA meetings, meetups.
Yep, yep.
I've had success like referrals, like someone said, oh yeah, or a realtor said like, oh yeah, I use this guy, he's good. Okay, that's worked. I've had like Craigslist has been successful. Just referrals as well have been successful. Like, hey, I have a good plumber. I asked the plumber like, who else do you know who can help me with electrical stuff? He refers you to a couple electricians, and that works out. I don't think there's a magical place. I think you gotta, just gotta put in the effort to find that person. And there's a little bit of trial and error. So I've never bat 1,000 with contractors. That's the other thing. So just realize like you have to maybe on a project on a flip, like you'll try out 5 contractors. 3 are awesome. So you keep those 3. And now you got 2 spots for your next flip. And then you find that next guy. So now you got like 1 spot open. And then it's like, okay, for your next flip, you find that guy. So there's is a little trial and error, unfortunately. I wish there wasn't. How about you? But I'm stuff.
Oh, yeah, and the thing too is contractors are like tenants. They're good until they're not, right?
Yeah.
It's like one of my partners is like, he'll have a tenant for like 8 years, they never miss a payment, and then they're just like they don't answer the phone, the payments aren't coming, and it turns into an eviction. And we've been blessed to have a handful of contractors who have been with us a while, but they're kind of doing like the interest rate debt market cycle thing too. It's like when they've got all this owner occupied high retail work, they're hard to get a hold of, and then all of a sudden that tapers off and they haven't been plugged in with the investors, and so you kind of got this supply and demand thing always happening with the contractors, on top of some contractors fly off the handle, have a gambling addiction, have a go into the bottle, just simply disappear, stop answering calls. So you kind of have this constant thing in flux. Like, just because a contractor was good on the last one doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get that same level of contracting on the next one. What's the most expensive mistake that you've made personally on a rehab to date?
Hmm.
And maybe it wasn't a renovation mistake. Anything you missed the ARV, you bought it too high. Like, what would be like the thing that if you could take that mistake back, you'd be real happy looking at the results.
Hmm. One comes to mind. I think there's a lot of value in like growing slowly. Because how I grew, I was like 2 flips, then the next year was 8, then 20, then 30. It's like there's, that was a good learning experience. Like it's been cool to grow and scale that quickly. But it's possible like to make the same mistake. And this is what happened on one of them, on 3 of them actually. So I bought 3 subsequently, and I was going to do like normal renovation, that sort of thing. I made a repair estimate mistake on all 3 of them. It was like 5K, like 5K, 5K, 5K. So it was a 15K mistake. So there's a lot of value in slow and steady. There's a lot of value in that, but there's also value in scaling. But how I look at it, I'd rather grow, talk about compound growth over the long term. I'd rather grow at 20% a year for 50 years than 90% a year for 10 years. So if you actually do the math, like you're miles and multiples ahead if you like grow slower, but like you grow more consistently over a longer term. That's how I've been thinking about it recently. So rather like slow and steady, and make sure like even if there is a downturn or if something happens or if a deal doesn't sell, like you're not knocked out of the game, because it is easy when you're trying to grow so fast to be that tight. So that's how I've been thinking about it recently. So just the slow and steady mindset. They say like Warren Buffett has made 99% of his wealth after the age 55. So you want to be thinking about this kind of long term and compounding, and how to stay in the game as long as possible.
Yeah, I think a big part of that too. I mean, to your point, the growth of 20% per year over 90% per year in this like hockey stick exponential thing.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of that's going to be the skill set. Like, how much better is Warren Buffett? Yeah, the capital pile grew, so the contacts grew, but also knowing certain industries or companies to avoid. Like, he got out of, I think he owned Solomon Brothers, and he did not own Solomon, I think, when they finally went bankrupt. A few years later, he got out of that business and, like, did not re enter. So, the experience compounding in the background is also a big part of what happens over time. We have done, I don't know, I mean, 283 deals last year, 180 something this year. I forget if we did 225 the year before that. And we've been doing them a whole bunch, all the way through. So out of that large number of deals, we had our worst deal ever. I think we closed out of it this year, and we owned it for 2 or 3 years. We had a couple we owned for two
Oh
or
yeah.
3 years.
Yeah.
One of these was we got a little bit too creative on our rehab. Oh, we're going to dig the basement. We're going to finish it. Suddenly we got caught by the city. We had to go back into permits. Now it's the
Mm.
architect. And so it was a construction delays after delay after delay. Luckily, the market kind of followed us up. So we kind of broke even on that deal,
Okay.
give or take. It was like, two grand one direction or the other. A $2,000 profit is about as happy as a $2,000 loss in that instance after all that work. So it was construction, needing permits and doing a little more, the moving walls, the HGTV like level of renovation we attempted on that. And this is like after hundreds of deals collectively with the partnership, and we still made that mistake. Um, Another one, we paid off some back taxes as part of the deal, off market deal. We paid the taxes off, and the way it works in Illinois, there's a tax buyer who actually pays the taxes as the tax buyer. And then when you pay it off to the city, this other investor gets paid off with their fees. Well, he turned out to be an attorney who really knew the law. And so he filed paperwork after we closed, put our money to work, and suddenly we're in this like 9 to 12 month, maybe even longer, protracted court battle where he was filing these motions and we were stuck in court. Can't sell the house if the property's in court. So we're like, well, we'll do the renovation and we'll do a little more than we thought because we're going to be stuck in this thing. So by the time we ended up having to settle with the tax buyer and he took his chunk of the profit, and then it's another year and a half, 2 years in, by the time we sell it, turns out the market completely moved away from condos where we were at in this neck of the woods. And we end up, selling it. We lost, I don't know, we lost over 6 figures on that one deal. Uh,
Yikes.
so
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, what are you gonna do, right? And
Mm.
thank God I did a volume of deals. It's like if you're gonna do a bad deal, having 4 or 5 or 10 or 100 deals cooking at any given time makes it a lot easier to sort of absorb that loss. And that's the nature of doing a high volume of deals. Is we're going to make a mistake here and there because we have to say yes to a lot of deals. We have to commit to a lot of deals to get to the point where we have this high volume of deals over time. So my final question before we get to our wrap up here is, what would be an important design consideration for you, Victor, in the Gainesville market when you're fixing and flipping a house? Where's like the smartest place for you to put your money, and describe the details?
Oh, like, yeah, I actually was looking at this recently. I actually found out this is an interesting stat. I wonder what it is for you and your numbers. I actually found out the more I put into a house, the less I make. So I found out for every 10,000 additional in renovation, I make 2,000 less in profit on average. It's not every deal. But I found that out recently. Like, oh my God, what am I doing here? The more I put into it, the less I make. So I think a lot of the highest value things, like clear it out. Like if it's full of stuff, like a hoarder house, you clear it out, adds a ton of value. That's probably the first one, like the most valuable. Like even like light landscaping, like if it's overgrown and it's a jungle, like just cleaning that up is going to add a lot of value. Paint adds a lot of value, and you can look up like the ROI for each of these things. I think for debris removal, it's like 150%. So if you put in $100, you get out $150. So as investors, like, hey, I'll do that every day, any day. I think for landscaping, it's like 120, something like that. And don't quote me on that, but like you put in $100, it's not going to be $100, but it's that sort of ratio. Put in
Mhm.
$100, you'll get out 120. And then for painting, I think it's like 110. So you put in $100, you pull out 110 bucks. So that's what I've seen. So I've, slowly, I've just been thinking about this a lot recently. Like the more I put into it, the less I make. So like, why am I putting so much into it? And there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm happy to dive into that, but just been, kind of switching up the model here. So that's the highest value stuff. So even like a kitchen, for example, interestingly enough, is about 80%. So you put 5 grand into a kitchen, you get 4 grand in additional value. It's kind of interesting, you know.
Yeah, here I was expecting you to be like, well, everyone in Gainesville likes this light gray granite now, so I got to make sure I
Well,
do
yeah,
that.
there's a little bit of that.
Like,
You know, people like the modern, so we do like light gray walls, white trim, light gray, like LVP.
yeah.
So we do that, but I'm just saying overall, you know.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're right. I mean, I've rehabbed a handful, especially when I hit the rocks and was broke. 08, 09, 10, 11, 12. That was not a fun time for Dan Breslin, and I had personal challenges going through. Grew out of that. Quit drinking on in January 2012. So things got a lot better after that, right? I was kind of like the contractor that flew off the handle. But things are good. I'm blessed, and I remember like rehabbing this house and like painting the house with the paint I found in the house. Like there was not rehab budget, and I made money. I lived there for 6, 7, 8, 9 months, and made 10 grand, 12 grand or something when we finally left. So looking back, it was a good thing. But yeah, ROI on the paint for that deal was, like you said, out of the park. We didn't even do the kitchen. So
Mhm.
yeah. Cool. Any other questions I forgot to ask that are pertinent that you think newer investors might have on their mind?
I don't know, something like what makes it different? Like what makes it different, like you versus another person who didn't get to your level? Like I guess I would ask that question. Like what's the difference? Because there's a lot of people who invest in real estate in '06, 05, '06, and started, similar backgrounds to you. So I'd just be curious, like why are you so different? Like what did you do differently, versus everyone else? Or like for me, for example, like not everyone in my market's doing the volume that I'm doing. So like what's the difference between me or someone else? I'd just be curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I was answering the question, I was so determined and pig-headedly stubborn to like hang on to real estate, and there were different weeks or months during that downtime where it was not working. Like I was not successful. I was broke. I had failed out, but like to me, there really was no other option. I feel like this is what God had in store for Dan Breslin. Like this was the promised land for me, was real estate. Um, and right when I quit drinking, shortly before that period in time, I struggled with drinking and drug addiction and things like that. Through that time period there beforehand, and I remember I picked the Bible up in 2011 while I was sitting in that semi-abandoned house I was rehabbing with a paintbrush, and I don't know. I mean, I think I turned my life over to God then, and I cleaned my act up, and I really started to get serious about growing as a person. Um, Not that other people haven't done that either. I just feel like maybe there's a certain path where you and I, and certainly people who are listening to this right now, they're destined to succeed on this path. And that path may not always be real estate necessarily, but they have a choice to get off that path, right? It's like the universe has a function for everybody that's out there. And if you're resonating with this specific thing, perhaps it is flipping houses, and perhaps you're supposed to grow and go up in volume. But there's other people who are going to assemble, 100, 300, 400 unit single family rental things, and they're not going to flip anything. And there's going to be a lot of tenants who celebrate holidays and nice quality rentals there because that person followed their purpose, just like, Elon Musk is following a purpose that we're all aware of and watching and all. And it's like his, job and role to spearhead the electric car through a decade when that was not a sexy or popular idea. And like everybody kind of has a path, I believe. And, if you're listening and you're willing and you're doing the work, I think you could succeed there. So like maybe it's real estate, maybe it's high volume flipping. Maybe
Mhm.
you're helping a large number of people achieve their dreams of fixing and flipping houses, and that extra cash makes all the difference in the world for that person. So it's, not to mention all these extra nice houses in all these neighborhoods where like the broken teeth were fixed. The
Yeah.
neighbors are happy because their prayers were finally answered. That overgrown house with the car in the driveway and the tree through the roof, there's someone living there, and the kids are now playing with the kids of the family who were praying for the solution there for like their neighborhood to improve, but they didn't really have the power. So yeah, I think that's probably how I would answer that question.
I love it. I love it. That's
Yeah.
pretty similar to how I would have answered it. Just like doing, just doing the work daily and just having the faith in the end goal. Like, hey, if I know things are bad right now, with your example, like, hey, I know things are bad right now, but if I keep doing what I'm doing, like eventually I'm going to be successful. Because sometimes like it is foggy, like the vision isn't clear, where it's like, hey, things suck right now, and it might be a while until it gets better. And I've been there, so I can relate to that. I think that's it. So just keeping at it daily, and no matter what, just like I'm gonna keep at this until I'm successful, and you make it happen.
Cool. I got two quick questions for you here. One is book recommendations. Victor, any book recommendations for the real estate investor slash agent audience?
Yeah, let's just tie it back to what I've been saying. Let's say I really like Good to Great by Jim Collins. I've read that book maybe 15 times, maybe 20 times. I have
Nice.
an audiobook. I listen to it over and over again. They talk about faith in the end goal, which is Stockdale paradox, if you're familiar with that term. And yeah, like, I think it's a great book, and it has that like slow and steady mentality. A lot of people today chase growth, and they chase growth, and like a lot of the people in those books, in that book specifically, I think they chase like, hey, I want a great team, like really focus on like hedgehog concept, like what they're passionate about, what can create impact, a lot of different things. I think that's a really cool book. Good to
Nice.
great.
And the crown jewel of wisdom, if you could go back and tell yourself, I don't know, 18, 19, 20 years old, if you could
Yeah.
share the crown jewel of wisdom with yourself at that age, knowing what you know now, what would that be?
I should have gotten started earlier, honestly. So I had a mentor who told me like 5, 6 years ago, like, hey, because I did like my first deal like a while back, but he's like, hey, like this flipping thing, like that's how he built his wealth, and then he got to the next thing, to the next thing. And he's like, hey, you should start flipping houses. This was like 5, 6 years ago. I didn't listen. Eventually, 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago, like got the jump and went full time. But who knows where I would have been, following the exponential graph, that 5, 6 years ago. So I would have told myself that advice. I would not have listened. That's the other key
Yeah.
thing. Just too stubborn. So
Yeah, true enough. I know the feeling. So where can listeners get more of you, Victor? Find out some more information, contact, etc.
yeah, for sure. So I have a free Facebook group where folks are interested. So I'll call the Six Figure House Flipper. So they want to reach out there. I have a great ton of like resources. I did like the deep dives into my deals, like break down everything A to Z. A lot of great resources, repair estimate guides, everything you could ever think of. I kind of share the process a little bit more. So that's Six Figure House Flipper. You just search it on Facebook, you'll find it.
All right, sounds good. Hey, I got a ton of notes, had a blast. I thank you for coming on the show, Victor.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. This was fun.